while Tammy Moore is on the stand telling us some of her background, we thought we'd take a moment to introduce our guest for today, Jennifer Schuster. Jennifer, how are you?
Hi, Linda. I'm good. I'm happy to be here.
Are you watching this? Because let me tell you, as a defense attorney in all my years, I have put my client on the stand 2 times. How many times have you put your client on the stand in a criminal murder or homicide trial?
Very rarely do we see this
Why?
because it's very fact specific, very fact specific, case by case, no one size fits all scenario, because it's just too risky. I mean, she is going to be subjected to what's most likely going to be a brutal cross-examination.
I'm ready to do it now, and I'm not, I used to be a prosecutor a long time ago, and I could just see it. I mean, I can't wait to cross her on her text. The fact that supposedly she has an open marriage, and then she's upset about Sydney. I mean, it's just amazing. But you know what? We have to go to break. There's going to be a lot more to talk about, and we want to get back into that courtroom. Let's go to break. What a day again it is on Law and Crime as we watch several trials. First, I just want to keep you up to date in the Ohio versus Wimpy case. We are on verdict watch, and color me surprised. When I left you Wednesday, I didn't think a defendant would testify in that case, and they did. And then, of course, we have the Moore case. But before we talk about the Moore case, we have to also inform you that next week we're going to start a new trial, the case of Texas versus Love. It is a death penalty case, another incredible, amazing case of why these people commit these crimes, if they did, or somebody did, obviously. But before we talk about all of that, we have to go to my favorite part of the day, a little relief, sometimes not. That's the top crimes.
Have charged a woman and her boyfriend with killing her mother and lighting her body on fire after an argument. 29-year-old Sasha Gonzalez is accused of suffocating her mother by placing a bag over her head and watched her boyfriend, 30-year-old Yancil Castillo, and his brother set the body on fire. Gonzalez initially told authorities she paid someone $50 to kill her mother, but later confessed to the murder. Gonzalez now faces charges of first-degree murder and tampering with physical evidence. Castillo faces charges of accessory after the fact, tampering with physical evidence, and abusing a dead human body. A man in Florida is under arrest after shooting another man outside of a bar for refusing an offer of a free shot of liquor inside the bar. 39-year-old Lathan Jean Yi turned himself into authorities after being caught on camera shooting at 39-year-old Eric Meeks outside of Frank's Place in Orlando. The shooting was allegedly over Meeks' refusal of a free shot of liquor from Yi after Yi reportedly made a remark to a woman at the bar. Meeks suffered a gunshot wound to the foot during the shooting. Yi now faces a charge of attempted second-degree murder. A detective in New York is coming under fire after allegedly telling an accuser of disgraced Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein she could delete information from her phone before giving it to prosecutors. The unidentified accuser claims Detective Nicholas DiGaudio told her it was okay to delete information she didn't want others to see before she handed her phone over to prosecutors. Weinstein has been accused by 80 women, including A-list actresses, of sexual misconduct. The allegations against Weinstein helped launch the hashtag #MeToo movement on social media, encouraging victims to tell their stories of sexual harassment and abuse. Weinstein is also under investigation in Los Angeles and London for alleged sex crimes. Those were today's top crime stories. I'm Anthony Velez for Law and Crime.
Thank you, Anthony. You know, Jennifer Schuster, it always amazes me, really, that a detective could possibly, if it's true, tell a victim in the Weinstein case that indeed she could delete all of her messages. Okay. So, you know what? We're having a little technical problems. We're going to go to a clip of Tammy testifying early today about her pregnancy. So, Jennifer Schuster, hopefully we can talk this time. Can you hear me? Okay. Now, you've been watching, I assume like the rest of us, glued to Law and Crime Network, watching Tammy Moore on the stand in her trial for conspiracy for kidnapping and kidnapping. What do you think of her testimony so far?
Well, so far, I think the defense is trying to show us the softer side of Tammy Moore, because we've gotten an earful from the state about how this is a very angry, vindictive, controlling woman who had her husband chained to his bed at night. So we're hearing about her as a mother, a daughter, as someone whose life was extremely gravely impacted as a result of these charges. I mean, we're seeing her tear up right there. Whether or not the jury is going to see that as crocodile tears, who knows?
Well, I have a question about that. What is the fact that she was charged and it affected her life? Because it could affect her life if she was charged and she's guilty to have to do with anything about whether the prosecution proved their case beyond a reasonable doubt.
I agree with you, and I think it's a little bit dangerous for the defense to push that point because, so what? She's been wearing an ankle monitor since 2015, and she couldn't find a job, and her husband couldn't find a job. Well, Heather Elvis, she isn't even here, so what about her?
And then the other thing I picked up on, Jennifer, is that it was very interesting because, the prosecution wants to say she's controlling, and therefore she was controlling Sydney to kill Jennifer Elvis. She said, Tammy on the stand, she told police, we wanted an attorney. I thought that if you listen closely, that we just fell right into what the prosecution has been saying, that she's the one who controls. She's the one who makes the decisions. And Sydney basically doesn't do anything without her approval, unless, of course, it's having an affair with a 19 or 20-year-old young lady.
Right. I agree with you. It's consistent with that theme that she was really the one who wore the pants in the marriage, which is what the state has been saying. On the other hand, perhaps she's trying to show that they really are a united front and that
united front, but united front could be, remember, she's on charge for conspiring with her husband in a united front to well, we know it's in this trial, it's not to kill somebody, but to kidnap someone. So if it's a united front, how does that help her? Doesn't that just give the prosecution more evidence to support their thematic?
Well, I think she could be saying that they're a united front in their innocence, that they wanted to be defended together because they were both being wrongfully accused.
Well, I having tried a number of murder cases along the years, and even as a prosecutor, when you put a defendant on the stand, everything you have done before. So the pregnancy test came out positive for Tammy Moore, but it was after Heather Elvis went missing. The pregnancy test, if I just heard Deborah James correctly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong out there in my chat room, was in March of 2014, correct? Tammy is now testifying, will testify later on, and she'll confirm that pregnancy test. But I don't know how that helps whether or not there's a motive to kill Heather Elvis in 2013. And you're going to have to tell me. I want you guys to chat about it so we can discuss it later on. Because indeed, if she got pregnant later on, and she's only like 6 weeks pregnant or something like that, then so what? So what? Indeed, she had still had a motive to kill Heather Elvis in 2013. So again, whenever you put on a case as a defense, you better make sure that it helps. I'm going to bring Jennifer Schuster in. Jennifer, what do you think about that? I mean, I'm confused.
I agree with you. It's a little bit confusing why they're harping on this issue so much. I think the defense is really just trying to take away from the state's argument that there was this belief that Heather was pregnant because obviously Tammy was pregnant. But I don't think it really matters in terms of motive. The motive still could have existed whether or not Heather Elvis was pregnant. I think that the defense...
But Jennifer, remember the timeline. This custodian of records, Deborah James, says the pregnancy test came out in March of 2014. Heather disappeared. The last time anyone ever saw or heard from her was in the morning hours of December 8, 2013, not 2014. So if Tammy wasn't pregnant until later on, several months later, how does that show that Heather couldn't have been pregnant by her husband? Again, someone has to tell me, because I don't know how this advances the defense case towards a not guilty verdict.
Well, I think there's a possibility that, in fact, it was Tammy who was taking that pregnancy test. And there's, I think, evidence that somebody purchased a pregnancy test. And the question was that pregnancy test for Tammy or was it for Heather? And they're trying to argue it was for Tammy because she, in fact, is pregnant.
And so, in fact, you're right. The testimony, just in case no one knows, is that on the night Heather went missing, there was a pregnancy test purchased at Walgreens by Sydney Moore. Walmart by Sydney Moore, okay, who was Tammy Moore's husband. And the question is, who was that purchase for? Was it purchased for Heather Elvis to confirm so he could meet her and confirm whether or not she was pregnant, or was it purchased for his wife because she was trying to get pregnant, right? Is that the argument?
Right. Yeah, and even if the test was for Tammy and it turned out that Tammy was the one who was pregnant, I still think there's very much a motive for them to plan to kidnap or to kidnap Heather Elvis. It doesn't take away from that possibility.
Well, let's see, because we're going to have to now go to another custodian of records to see what other medical information we may learn about the Moore family. This is Betsy Green. So again, that is Betsy Green, who happened to be wearing green, talking about the medical records from March 28th, 2014. Jennifer, again, this is the same issue we had before in medical records. So what? So what? Tell me. I mean, I'm a juror. So what? I want to have my popcorn. What's going on?
I think you're right. So we get it. She was pregnant. But the question is, was that test purchased for Tammy or Heather back in December 2013 when Heather went missing? And does it really even matter?
Well, doesn't it give her more of a motive because that she's going to get pregnant by her husband to show everybody? Doesn't even maybe give more of a motive to show, okay, they're back together. He killed Heather with her help, you know, or kidnapped her in this trial, not murdered her, with her help. And now Heather is out of the way. They can go on with their lives, and she can do what, you know, Heather may have been, which is get pregnant.
Yeah, I think that it kind of cuts both ways. If she, in fact, is the one who's pregnant, maybe that solidified their union and their agreement to move forward with this kidnapping. On the other hand, if it's Heather who's pregnant, that, of course, would be a motive on behalf of Tammy and Sydney to move forward with the kidnapping as well. So I don't think it's really relevant because I think it can be argued both ways. But I think the defense is doing a good job creating this diversion and saying at least, hey, the state has been saying Heather was pregnant and that's the motive, and it's Tammy who is pregnant.
Well, you know what? There's so much more to talk about again, so much more to listen to. Before we do that, we have to go to another break, but I want you to stay with me. South Carolina versus Tammy Moore. So that is Tammy Moore on the stand in her own defense discussing how it was that she was taken to the 2 hospitals for pregnancy tests. Jennifer Schuster, I have a different take on this testimony, and let me discuss that with you if we could. I think the fact that the police didn't believe her is something that the attorneys can point to later on, that they had their sights set on her and they weren't going to listen to anything she had to say, even when she told them she was pregnant. Even after it was confirmed, they had to take her for a second test or a second checkup. What do you think about that?
Police from the outset of this investigation had tunnel vision, and they zeroed in on Tammy and her husband, and they didn't look at other suspects, or at least they just believed that these folks were guilty. And that is suggested by the fact that they just didn't believe anything that she said, not even when she said that she was pregnant.
Not even when it's confirmed by a test, they didn't believe it, correct? They just didn't believe it. So they didn't believe the hospital. They didn't believe anything. Now, she could be innocent and her husband guilty, right?
And we'll see. Maybe she'll end up pointing the finger at him. Maybe that's the bombshell that she's been waiting to drop, and that's why she wants to testify. We'll just have to wait and see.
Now, I know in our chat room people don't like her very much, and, you know, if you think she's guilty, there's nothing to like. But I think so far she hasn't been ruffled on the stand. But this is the direct. Explain how a client is different on the stand in direct versus cross-examination, or it can be different.
Sure. Well, on cross-examination, of course, the defendant will be under attack. They will be challenged in terms of the substance, their credibility, and they could very easily fall apart. Also, they can just be not likable. We know that juries have a tendency to construe really anything that the defendant says or any of the defendant's behavior in a negative light. These tears you're seeing here, maybe the jurors are thinking these are crocodile tears, you know, or if she didn't cry, they'd say, well, she's cold and calculating. That's the challenge of having a defendant testify. What
if you have, let me put this, what if you have a woman in the jury whose husband has been unfaithful? How do you think they're viewing her testimony, Tammy's testimony, in relation to that? Because that's always a consideration, that somebody's had the same experience, correct? Not murdering or kidnapping, but in terms of husband.
The jurors were asked that when they were polled, and we know, in fact, I would think that those jurors would have been dismissed at least, you know, by one of the lawyers. But yeah, absolutely. We know that jurors are instructed to set aside those biases, but human nature is to consider those things. And I think that somebody, a scorned woman, would likely identify with Tammy, and maybe identify, hey, the same thing happened to me, but I didn't go out and kidnap the girl, so I don't think Tammy did that either.
Well, yesterday, I think part of the defense strategy was putting her family on the stand because they had her sister on the stand, and then her children were supposed to testify, and they couldn't because they had violated an order because they were watching on a computer the streaming of Law and Crime Network, our network apparently, okay, which is good for us but bad for them because they couldn't go on the stand. Now, the fact that the other kids couldn't go on the stand, do you think that hurts in some way, or does it just not matter?
It's a ready-made issue for appeal. I mean, the fact that a substantial part of her defense was barred. We're talking about 5 witnesses that she planned on calling that couldn't testify. The judge said they're out because they violated that order. Now, I think the state should have called them and capitalized on the fact that these folks violated a court order, and that would have chipped away at their credibility on the stand.
Yeah, my experience has been in a case that has significant penalties at the end, usually in murder cases, that the violation of the order, the judge will just do something else. But we're going to listen to more about what is happening in the courtroom, and Tammy is going to be telling us about her conversations with Heather Elvis. This is Tammy Moore on the stand in her own defense in her own trial for conspiracy and kidnapping of Heather Elvis. Now, let me just say before we talk to Jennifer Schuster about this, that a lot of this case is built on circumstantial evidence. Now, the last time before we went to break, I told you that the children of the defendant were watching our stream. Now, I can assume that because it's circumstantial, but I don't know that. You may have believed me because it's circumstantial, but then again, it may not be true. So I have to warn you that we can say a lot of things and discuss a lot of things that may not be true, but by inference appear to be the logical probability, if that made sense to anybody. All right, so when we're going to talk more about this, we're going to bring in Jennifer Schuster, who's an amazing trial attorney. Jennifer. Now, in these clips, when she talks about Heather Elvis, she's calm, she is collected, and she says that she was a nice girl. A couple of things. The was a nice girl. Does that mean a past tense that she knows something we don't know? Let's start with that one.
Yeah, I think that was a little bit of a foot in the mouth syndrome there. And I think the defense missed a real opportunity here because, like you said, Linda, I mean, come on, get real. She was a nice girl. We've seen how you talk, Tammy Moore. We've seen those salacious text messages, and it's just not believable that she would say she was a nice girl.
Right. And
I mean,
in fact, in one of the text messages to her sister, I think she said, her sister said she was at the Tilted Kilt where Heather Elvis worked and was a good worker, according to her boss, and a hard worker, always on time, everything, a good person. And then she calls Tammy, says, well, do you see her there? The bitch must be in hiding. Now, if she was such a nice girl, why is she calling her those names?
Exactly, and it's just not believable that she would feel this compassion. I mean, maybe a little bit to some extent because the girl in fact is missing. But on the other hand, it's an opportunity for her to say, yeah, I was angry. Of course I was angry, and maybe the defense will pick that up somewhere else.
Okay, so much more to listen to, so much more to discuss, but first we have to go to break. This is amazing testimony from the son of Tammy Moore. Now, I've never had a case where the judge takes away, I mean, you'd have to pry this out of my hands, obviously, a cell phone in a sequestration order. Have you?
I'm actually shocked that the deputy, no one saw this kid with a cell phone. I mean, actually in Chicago, there are courtrooms where I can have a cell phone in my hand and the deputy will slap it out of my hand and I'm just looking at my calendar. So to me, it's astounding that these kids were able to be watching this computer. Lots of courtrooms, you can't even bring in a cell phone or a computer if you're not a lawyer.
Well, I'll tell you, we're going to be listening to more about this, but it's just an amazing situation. We have to first go to break, and we'll be right back. Wow, wow, wow. Jennifer Schuster, are you as astonished as I am that this is coming in?
That they're not objecting as to relevance?
Well,
is that what you're talking
well,
about?
no, that it's coming in. It's for that the defense is actually putting it on, right? This is the defense case that she's pregnant after Heather Elvis went missing. Doesn't that give her even like a motive, like we got back together because we now know Heather is out of the way and now I can get pregnant?
Yeah, I think you can also look at it, though, as it sort of is showing the softer side of Tammy Moore, because we haven't seen that so far until she's taken the stand. So we're hearing about her as a wife, as a mother, this softer side that certainly the state hasn't depicted so far. So this is giving her an opportunity to do that.
Well, you know, we did miss the opportunity to see her children on the stand, and whether or not this is a softer side, I see your point that you could have both ways, that it could be a motive and maybe not not a motive. But indeed, if she's trying to compete with Heather Elvis, who's 20 years old back then, doesn't she compete by fulfilling her dream of now she's pregnant and not Heather Elvis?
That's the argument to make. But on the other hand, I think the defense has bigger issues with the fact that with some of these cell phone records. I mean, at least I think that they're trying to focus, though, on this pregnancy as a way to create this diversion and just say that the state had it wrong. It was really Tammy who was pregnant and not Heather Elvis.
Well, you know, when you admit medical records, a lot of times the hearsay in the medical record is actually redacted, what people tell you. It's just the actual medical record, and most people don't realize that. But there was something this morning that was kind of a slip-up about what was in it, and she was something like 6 weeks pregnant. How does the fact that she gets pregnant afterwards help the defense in any way, besides her being soft?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think...
I heard that. I know you have to think about this one.
Well, I think that if she got pregnant after the fact, it shows that they were back together. And they were...
I got you. They're back together. Why are they back together? Because Heather Elvis is gone, and she knows she's gone and never coming back. Isn't that the problem now of putting this defendant on the stand here when you had, in my opinion, reasonable doubt beforehand?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, you could argue that it didn't matter to her, the fact that they had this affair. She got over it, and they got back together, and they were happy, and they were pregnant, notwithstanding the fact that he had an affair with this Heather Elvis.
What about the suggestion once before that Sydney may have had a vasectomy, and that's why Heather couldn't get pregnant? I thought I heard that in cross-examination. Maybe I'm going crazy, but a few days ago.
No, you did, and that's confusing, right? They're saying that he had a vasectomy, so he couldn't have gotten anyone pregnant. But here we are talking a lot about pregnancy, and it turns out that Tammy was, in fact, pregnant. So it is confusing. I think it'll be confusing for the jurors as to why that was even brought up.
Well, we want to hear more in how we got to the point where Tammy is allowed to talk about this and what brings us to this point. So we're going to listen more about another custodian of records in the hospital where Tammy went. It's not just her testimony. Deborah James. 2 pregnancy tests to show that Tammy Moore was actually pregnant in March of 2014. Let me bring Jennifer Schuster back in to discuss this. Now, Sydney and Tammy never really broke up. They were always together during this period of time where he was having the affair with Heather Elvis. You understand that, right? Right. So in November, however, she takes away his phone, and she's going to tell us, or has told us, as we heard earlier, that she was trying to get pregnant, and in fact, the police did not believe that she's pregnant. On the night that Heather Elvis goes missing, on the night of December 18, 2013, in Walmart, her husband, Sidney, buys a pregnancy test. Who is it for? Do you believe it's for the defendant or for Heather Elvis, who's missing?
I don't know, and I don't think it really matters. I think that it can be construed in the favor of the state or in the favor of the defense, just depending on how you spin it.
So you think this is irrelevant evidence, that she's pregnant, that there was a pregnancy test at all? Or does it favor anybody, or does it not move us towards the beyond a reasonable doubt standard?
I don't think it moves us towards the beyond a reasonable doubt standard. How
about the issue of the cops didn't believe Tammy was pregnant either, that they had to take her to 2 hospitals with 2 separate tests? What does that do for the state's case?
Right. Well, I mean, it helps the defense. I mean, it shows that no matter what this woman said, they didn't believe her. And in fact, she was telling the truth. So, I mean, it shows that the police sort of had these blinders on from the outset.
You may see it that way. Somebody else may see it another way. But we have to go to break first. We can't decide. So let's go there.